Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to Oxford University eSymposium 2020. Thank you so very much for taking time out and being with us in this virtual space. Looking forward to interacting with you and via the chat box, your questions and your queries and your valuable comments and anything that you would like to add on, which would lend itself to all of us. So let's begin. The topic for this today's session is very close to my heart. It's something that I've always believed in. For the last 32 years that I've been teaching mathematics to students at various levels and various ages, I always went into this teaching of mathematics, uh, telling my children, my students, and to myself that till you love it to the core of your being, you're never going to excel in it. So to make a piecemeal attempt of just, sort of uh, cruising through the subject is not what we teachers of mathematics are all about. We would want to have our children get into this subject, believe in this subject, love this subject. And so we today we are going to have a discourse and a discussion about how better can we teach mathematics by instilling the love for it, and automatically it'll sort of be something which will become a part of them. And mathematics is a subject that takes them for the rest of the life and is part of them for the rest of the life. So the common thing about students saying, oh well, this is it, I just have to do a compulsory maths till this level and thank God for that, and I don't have to look at numbers for the rest of my life. Well, that is not happening ever, because this is some one subject that is with you at all times. So let's begin. So today's session's outcome is basically, of course, as we just talked about, the interest in mathematics that we need to inculcate in our students, and the approach towards is to have mastery in mathematics. And when you do, I mean, the child has to love the subject. If he's comfortable with it, he masters the art of it, of course he's going to love the subject, and he will be sort of would want to maybe even take it up at college level and university level. So mastering mathematics is essential, and how do we do that is what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about the street teaching strategies that have been outlined in the SNC, because now the whole world has become a global village. So the mathematical competencies and the mathematical pedagogical strategies have also sort of globally converged. And the SNC now outlines the global trends that are happening. SNC, as in, if most of you know, is the single national curriculum that will be effective as the government has announced from March, April 2021. So basically, we're going to talk little about the single national curriculum also, whereby the pedagogical techniques that the single national curriculum is talking about. So the core curriculum is still there with a little bit of add-ons and a bit of movement and progression. Maybe billions is not taught when it should be, or millions is not taught when it should be. So slight shift in the progression of the syllabus, but more so the single national curriculum is talking about, and it has elaborated a lot about on the pedagogical techniques. How do you teach the learning outcomes that have already been there? Just sort of elaborated more and focused more on that. So today it sort of ties in very well, because you will instill the love of mathematics, the interest in mathematics, the mastery in mathematics, if your pedagogical techniques are sound and they are interesting and they're fun and they're comprehensive and concise. So it's all about bringing together global trends and the functional mathematics that has now become a core part of imparting the syllabus of mathematics is something that we're going to be talking about. Feel free to add on to any of the comments that you would like to add on to, or ask any queries. I will take them up towards the end of the session, the questions. So another thing that we'll be talking about and will be tying in with what we are talking about are the features of New Countdown. How does that tie in to our philosophy and our belief of mastering and instilling the love for mathematics? So let's begin. So, what is maths mastery? It is an approach which is completely transformational. It sort of brings into the child the belief that all can be freed up in mathematics. Everybody can reach and rise to a certain level, which is something that all children can aspire to. There's no such thing as that I can't do maths, my mom couldn't do maths to save her life, and me neither. It is not that at all. It is about just like you've never heard any child say that I cannot read. Well, but you do hear even grown up saying I could never add and I could never do numbers, but you will never hear a grown up say I could never read. So I tried and I could never read. That's because the way the subject is taught, the language is taught, um, makes sure that the literacy in students is there and it is at a higher level than mathematics numeracy capability skills. It's really shocking and surprising that in America and in the developed countries the numeracy competency is almost close to a quarter of the population. So if you talk about a math literate basic core competency, elementary math literacy is concerned, is just around 26%, which is horrific. So globally, there's this new trend where the Singaporean approach, the pictorial approach, the mastery of mathematics has sort of, converged together, and that is also outlined in the single national curriculum. So if you look at this diagram here, this holistic approach in maths mastery, it is talking about, first of all, the soul and the being. How do you get into the subject? How do you go about teaching it? How do you go about believing in it? How do the students think about it? They have to be passionate, they have to be courageous, positive. They have to have that belief that they can do it. And it has to be definitely, I mean, you have to be very, very consistent, resilient. So that's the psychological part about mathematics. It's really surprising, but the emotional intelligence and the emotional, there's one thing as emotional intelligence, there's another thing which is the emotional self-efficacy that is now being researched upon, and they have figured out that the direct correlation between the child's emotional self-efficacy and the performance in mathematics, they completely tied in together, more so than any other subject. So mathematics is definitely, I would put it down to almost 80% is like psychological and the rest is all about knowing it. So once you know, you deep dive into the subject and say, oh, well, I can do it, only then you'll be able to do it. But if you get into it by saying, I will never be able to master this subject, I can never do it, and I've been failing or flunking or just managing to tide by, with that defeatist attitude, you're never going to get down to business with mathematics. So to be able to sort of, solve math problems with the right approach. How are you going about problem solving in mathematics? That is very important. You have to have a structured approach. You need to go into it with a very sort of positive attitude, whereby you're talking about, if you look at the cylinder cyclic diagram here, you can see that you're talking about application, you're talking about the structured approach, you're talking about exam conditioning, and you're definitely talking about the core curriculum. So these are the things that sort of tie in into this subject. If you look at the mastery approach, it is an inclusive approach. Inclusivity is the new buzzword wherever you go, whether it's you're in a workplace or in an educational institution, and wherever there is a performance oriented, result based situation or environment, you're talking about inclusivity, which means you're taking everybody together. You are not leaving anybody behind. Everybody has to come up to a certain point and only then you move up. So the whole classroom has to sort of, evolve together. Some will sort of trudge in a little later, but eventually a point will come where everybody plateaus out to the same mastery level. That is what the inclusivity is all about, mastery is all about. Your belief and telling your children that everybody can succeed, and not just the quick learners. The quick learners will reach the peak or the plateau at earlier than the others, but the others are for sure going to reach that point also. So that is what mastery is all about. It is about reorganize. And how do you go about it? You reorganize the whole classroom environment. I mean, the ones who are the quick learners, you've got other activities or other challenging questions, mind you, not as challenging as so that it puts them off. Okay, oh well, I'm being punished for the fact that I've got the hang of it faster than the others, but making them interested and making them passionate about the fact that, oh well, okay, so I've reached this point and I need to move on to the next, and giving them the self validation of, and they appreciate their own ability, and they celebrate their achievements. So bringing in challenging tasks and setting aside high end tasks for students who are the quick learners, make it more of a celebration, make it more of a positively approach it, so that they don't feel burdened. Oh well, I've done this bit, now she's setting aside or he's setting aside something even more challenging just so that I get engaged and I get tired, or there's so many psychological nuances and aspects to a child's thinking when he is sitting in the classroom and he's with you. So be mindful of that. So also, when you're talking about organizing the classroom time and teaching prep time accordingly, I mean, how is it that when you've got this, if you look at this model, this flowchart model there, I mean, you're talking about practicing, you're talking about making mistakes, you're talking about how did you make the mistake, you're talking about why did you make the mistake, how do you fix the mistake, and then in the end you are testing the skill in a way which sort of correlates his understanding and checks his understanding, and not just goes into a pattern of rote memorization and rote checking and rote assessments, where whatever has been done in a computational formatted manner is you're moving on. Don't do that. So it has to be very cyclic, it has to be very fluid, it has to be very interactive. So even just, it's not about activities don't have to be interactive. It's just the entire teaching process, the learning process has to be interactive. Why did you make this mistake? How did you make this mistake? What were you thinking? How do we fix it? Let's do it together. Let's collaborate. How do you want help with your friend, or would you rather we did it together on the board? Okay, so I think we're all together on this. Let's try and have a short, quick quiz. So this is all what is mastery all about, including everybody, taking in, everybody together and working through. So let's move on to the teaching strategies here. If you take a look at the teaching strategies that are there in the S&C, they are there globally in most of the curriculum now. As I told you earlier, the mathematical literacy that has become such a sore point in a lot of government education ministries is about the mathematical literacy, because they're saying that it is directly correlated to economic viability. I mean, if people have to be economically sound, if the nation has to be economically sound, they have to make the right mathematical decisions or financial decisions in their lives for them to be able to do better. And when that is done in a sort of a individual way it is approached and this problem is sorted out, automatically the trickle down effect is that the whole nation and the whole country becomes an economically sound state. So going back to your primary level now and to the secondary level, whether it's primary level or secondary level, what are the teaching strategies that are globally being embraced and globally being adopted? And the research says that these strategies are bearing fruit. And what is that? I mean, we all know about the inquiry-based learning. We know about the discovery approach. Now the focus more is on the practical work. How are you sort of practically showing them the concept, and how are you? And another interesting one is, of course, it's made a comeback is the heuristic approach, whereby a student is set a task and he investigates it, he discovers it, and he for himself figures out the concept, and the teacher is just the guide by the side and sort of nudging the student to come to a conclusion about a certain concept or a certain property or a certain equation or a mathematical statement. And all of this is done in a cooperative, collaborative manner. So that is really, really important, weaving in the collaboration and sort of embedding and the passion for math, the embedding the love for math, and going about it in a cooperative, collaborative manner, whereby the children discover and learn and make mistakes and then mend their mistakes together as a group and a family. So automatically the whole classroom becomes this one big community, which all of them are brought up together to the plateau together. And that is how the mastery approach is uh, sort of achieved. Now, a little about the demonstration approach. Now that we're going to talk about the pedagogical techniques, I'm also going to tie in the features of Countdown that help you realize these pedagogical techniques, which is that, for example, a teacher's role is to demonstrate mathematical concepts practically and invite questions while the learners are encouraged to observe, reflect, and draw relevant inferences about the mathematical concept. So, I mean, these little teacher's notes, do this, let's get into the garden, let's make these tabulate and collate this information, and and then teach by ask mathematical questions, ask them, why do you think this is happening, why do you see a pattern in what you've collected, and why did you collect the way you did, what mathematical equation can you formulate. I mean, there's so many things that you can ask when they are sort of out there collecting the information or the data, and they're out there investigating. So demonstration approach works like that. The new math lab approach has been mentioned in the single national curriculum, and they've asked, put in the teaching strategy section, they've said that every classroom should have a math lab. Now, math lab doesn't mean that you have to have your this scientific models and apparatus and instruments and things like that. The manipulatives can be non-standard and standard units. I mean, both. I mean, you could have base 10 blocks, and but you can also have your place value charts, or you could have your strings and your ropes and your Lego blocks. I mean, you could have standard and non-standard units, but it is important to have a math lab area in the classroom, whether it's a primary level classroom or a secondary level classroom. A corner set aside, which is with shelves and all the manipulatives, standard and non-standard, meaning real life objects and materials like candies and sweets and beads, but even counters and buttons and dice and spinning wheels, and so you've got all sorts of materials that's set aside over there, and the teacher engages the students by picking out the stuff from the math lab corner, or and then just on a regular basis just gets up and grabs the manipulatives and just shows it to them. So important, very important, that children work in an informal manner, move around the classroom, discuss, choose, tabulate, tackle a situation. Tasks that are assigned in such a manner whereby they are so organized, and the lesson plans are made in such a fashion that the projects and the assignments that have to be set to the students are done in such a way that when they are set this task, the teacher's already aligned and set with her work. Once she's set and she's organized, automatically all the activities fall into place. If you talk about the practical approach, I mean the practical work approach, activities need not just be done in your math lab corner in a classroom, because that sort of restricts the child and psychologically tells the child, oh, well, I can only, sort of he correlates the math by saying, oh, well, that's my corner, that's where I go for my practical mathematics and my manipulatives. The child has to understand that math is everywhere, and for him to love the subject, he needs to see that it is all around him. So take him to the garden, take him to the schoolyard, take him outside, the field trips, the classroom, the auditorium, give him an assignment that makes him go out with his parents or within his community or his neighborhood, family and friends. So give him activities and sort of assignments that sort of broadens his horizons, and he connects the points and the logs it out with the real life examples. So when we say, oh, there has to be a real life word problem, we don't realize that when we are teaching, we need to have assignments and assessments, and even assessments for that matter, and activities that incorporate this aspect. Cooperative learning, though, I've just talked about, so I'm hoping that should not be a problem. Let's talk about differentiation. We all know that all learners and groups, I mean, they have various levels of understanding and various approaches that they are sort of receptive to. So whenever you are teaching a particular concept and you bring in the pictorial and you bring in real life and you bring in concrete materials, you bring in the abstract part of it, which approach would tie in for that particular child and click in, you don't know. So that is why the multiple strategies that you have to bring in while you're teaching a particular concept is so very important. Only then you would know that each child at his own pace and at his own time will grab on to whichever strategy was beneficial to him. So we need to understand the learner's need to think about it, be intuitive about your child, each of your children. Okay, what will click with whom? If you take a look at the features of Countdown, which foster and instill the love for mathematics, you'll notice that these are math flashes and they're key vocabulary words, interesting facts, there are tricks and do you know, interesting things about the bullish. I mean, in this particular do you know, it says talks about the why a dealer is called a bull in a stock market and a bear in a stock market and a stag in a stock market. So bringing in language and real life comprehension, tie in, the English subject, the language itself, math itself is a language, treat it as a language. So interesting features, as you can see here, the mind benders that are there. There are, quick activities, there are challenges, do them. If you're organized from before, for sure it would not take more than 2-3 minutes in a classroom for you to be able to sort of carry on with it. I mean, if you look at this mind bender, and there's this rabbit that's I think it's a rabbit, yes, it's a bunny rabbit, and you've got a game there. I mean, play games. I mean, if you have the facility of a computer, bring in the websites. There's so many websites, and even Oxford University Press is working on its digital platform whereby you'll have games access to you, where you can bring in the love and the fun in mathematics. Similarly, if you take a look at these features, these are features that are very helpful to the students and for the teachers. It says, remember, this is a small note. You're basically guiding the students about recalling some facts, or embedding a certain concept, or furthering a certain concept, that intersections, or for example in this one it's saying that intersection of two sets only has elements that are common to both, and in a union when you're combining two sets, only the common ones are only taken once. So just remember that, don't forget, don't write the common ones twice. So just these told you so, and reminding them of facts, quick references, that sort of they're quick, they're small tabs. Make use of these features because it's something that will be in good stead for the students. Here also, I mean, the commutative and the associative and the distributive property, it's sort of so clearly sort of compartmentalized on the page, that it's boxed, and it's sort of the points are clearly sort of demarcated, and it goes in the child's mind eye. Okay, I mean, commutative property means this, and associative means this, and distributive means this. So if it is sort of the visually, it's so well sort of stepwise formatted, it's so much easier for the child to remember. And those who have a photographic memory, then it clicks on very well to them. And for those who need to learn, I mean, they've got this table, they can even if it works for them, transfer it into their copies, and it's good to go for them. Again, these are these palindromes. I mean, these quick, interesting, fun facts. What are palindromes? And number palindromes, playing games, and this need not take too much of the classroom time. I mean, the children can just play a quick game. Okay, let's just put this in a flashcard. I mean, and you can say, oh well, I've got these flashcards. Put these numbers in. Let's just see quickly on a flashcard how you can come up with the number palindromes. So yeah, so I mean, as long as you're organized, it's never it's going to take so much too much of your classroom time. If you take a look at this, another interesting thing that I noticed was these perfect numbers. I mean, these quick notes. I mean, these perfect numbers. Even I mean, teaching for the longest time, 30 years or so, and perfect numbers had just slipped my mind. Apparently, these interesting facts, mathematical facts, that perfect numbers are numbers that their factors add up to the number itself, other than the number itself. So 6 is the smallest perfect number because the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. And other than 6, if you add 1, 2, and 3, they will add up to the number. Interesting. I mean, and then make them go out there and discover and give them an assignment over the weekend and say, oh, go out there and look for some more perfect numbers for us and share in the classroom. I mean, it's something that you will explain to them maybe in 2-3 minutes, give them the assignment for the next in another 3 minutes, and then just tell them to sort of look for it, think about it, reflect about it, search, ask the parents for help and brothers and sisters, and then come back to the classroom the next day or over the weekend, and then just share the fun fact. So yeah, so lots and lots of features, lots and lots of fun things that you can do along with the absolute core abstract concept of mathematics that will instill the love for mathematics. And once the love is there, for sure the child is going to master this subject, just like English. I mean, the way they can read fluently, for sure they'll be able to do maths fluently without trudging and sort of feeling heavy about it. I mean, they will just breeze through it. I've got a few cutouts and activities in front of me, which I would like to share with you all. I've got it compartmentalized for primary and a few for secondary. Just want to show you a few that are there in the countdown series, and I mean, you can use it in quick ways whereby you make it fun, make it more comprehensive. And if you are particularly sound, the teacher herself is sound or himself is sound in a particular concept, and then is going to use manipulatives that would be conducive to the understanding of the child, and you'll be able to achieve results which are going to be amazing. So let's begin. I mean, for example, you've got this multiplication grid here, familiarizing them with tables and mental math tips. I mean, I'm sure you lots and lots of mental math tips about. I mean, you must have discovered that the 9 times table, if you see that it is always the sum, and 27, it's 9 threes are 27, so 1 less 2, and then it adds up to 9, so 2 plus 7 is 9, 27, and then if you write down the multiples, they all go in the same order, ascending and descending. So lots and lots of tricks also and tips that you can give them. Show them a flashcard and work your way. Similarly, if you take a look at the multiplication, I mean, this activity that is there, I mean, I'm just going to grab this yarn, or maybe this throw rope here. You've got these beads. You can all see that you can string these beads, and you all can tell them, I mean, explain to them, I mean, this activities that is there. I mean, I've got this in a Ziploc bag for each child. I mean, you could put it on the table and say, let's just string these. As you can all see, I'm bringing it closer to my screen. You've already cut it out from before, and you've got your material there. put on the table for each child, and they can string these beads and the number and go on to the repetitive addition that is there. I mean, even the beads can be put on Ziploc bags and ready for the children to just, do this activity. Quick and nippy and effective, right? So, I mean, you've got a bowl of beads, you've got the numbers, you've got the string. If you've got the material ready and cut out onto the table, placed onto the table, why not? I mean, I don't think it should take longer than 5 minutes. Similarly, if you talk about the concept of fractions, I mean, the concept of a whole, I've got this here, the fractional discs that are there, and, you've got these cut out, and you can cut them out, and then you can tell them that, how one makes a whole. As you can see here, I hope I'm not phasing out. Make a fractional card chart and cutouts, and show them that, you can divide them into groups or pairs and do this activity. I mean, even for that matter, equivalent fractions. I mean, I've got these equivalent fraction strips whereby, I mean, these strips are all equal in number, and you can tell them, oh, well, I'm going to fold them into 6 equal parts. I'm going to fold them into 12 equal parts, of 3 equal parts, of 4 equal parts, and then they all add up to the same whole. So, I mean, just giving them these strips, 3 or 4 of them, equal number of strips, and then just asking them to divide it into equal parts and explaining them the importance and significance of equal. So whether it's 1/3 or 2/6 or 3/9, it all sort of is the same thing. So you take those strips and you make them fold it into as many equal parts, and at the end of the day it still comes out to be the same. So equivalence taught and made easy with just these fun strips. Similarly, I mean, if you take a look at here also, I mean, you've got you're teaching them the thousands and the place value with the cubes. I mean, if you don't have them, you've got your Lego blocks. I mean, as you can all see, you can use these Lego blocks and use this as a unit, and use this as your tens, and use this as your thousands. And I've got my tens also here. So, I mean, you can say, oh, these are 3 tens and these are 2 units. So, and these are 6 or 4 hundreds. So 432 could be sort of explained using blocks. It shouldn't be a problem at all. And actually, it would be a lot of fun. I mean, they will correlate the numbers in the place values with the ice cream sticks and Lego blocks, and even your bundles of some twigs from the garden. So moving forward to even a sort of a level of grade 6 and grade 7, this is there in the countdown series where you've got your triangle. I mean, cut out. You have it from the 4. If you want to save time, I mean, if you don't want them to sort of wait and cut a triangle out, you've already got the cutout, and then you tell them, oh, well, you know what, the similar triangle like this, and I took the corners out. I tore them, and then I pasted them, as you can all see. So those corners, and guess what? They're all adding up to a straight line, and that means 180 degrees. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be that the child has to first draw a triangle, tear off the triangular parts, then waste time and sort of paste it. You can just show it to them, right? And it's already done, and so it's quick and easy. I mean, you must have seen a lot of videos of cooking, and all the steps are already done, and so they say, oh, well, simmer it for 20 minutes, and this is what, and the simmered pot is already there ready, and say, this is what it's going to look like after 20 minutes. So, if you're all organized and ready, there's no reason that it has to take more time. If you take a look at these magic squares, I mean, you can cut them out on a piece of paper and sort of, have them do these magic squares and have them ready from before. I don't know whether you can all see it. Yeah, so I've got these cutouts on me. So the activities that are there in the book, I mean, you've all got them ready. It's placed on each child's desk from before, and then they go about it. I mean, if you take a look at this, I mean, you're doing this activity. I mean, there's one of them is what fraction of the figure is white, red, not blue. I mean, ask them the same question and word it in a different way. So, I mean, wording it in a different way develops mathematical fluency, the language of mathematics. I mean, the same thing you can ask it in a different way. And but turns out, oh, miss, you've asked the same question again, but you've asked it in a different way. That is also really interesting. I mean, something that will lend itself a lot to the children. I mean, this for sure. I mean, you're talking about planes and intersecting planes. Talking about geometry and not doing it practically is mathematical murder, I feel. I mean, you cannot not. I mean, just pick up a piece of paper, some cardboards, and have these intersecting planes that are there in the book. You can create it and then keep it for with you for your next class or next year. I mean, using manipulatives, making it practical and more tangible is so important, and then correlating it with real life. You're talking about intersecting planes, and then you're showing the classroom walls and floor, and you're telling them, oh, well, as you can see, this is the intersecting planes, the walls and the roof and the floor, and just taking them to the auditorium if it has a bigger room, right? Similarly, when we talk about algebra, I mean, algebra is all geometry. I mean, GeoAlgebra is something that is as you can all see, GeoAlgebra is something that is you can make it into a card and explain it to them, right? The a plus b the whole square. And you're talking about the area of a circle. It's so well explained in the book. I can't. I seem to my cutouts are not coming onto the screen as well. But this circle and this how you cut it into 13 sectors and it gets folded. I mean, you can clearly sort of, here's a way to find the formula for the area of the circle. So you've got your 12 segments. We now have 13 sectors because you're going to cut it into 12 lines automatically. You get 13 sectors and rearrange them. And you'll notice approximately that it is a rectangle. And that's how you come to the formula of pi r into r, which is pi r square. Net diagrams. How do you explain the fact that the formula for a cylinder is 2 pi RH? Till the curved surface area of a cylinder, till you show them that this is the 2 pi r and this is the h. So if you've earlier explained pi r square practically, automatically the 2 pi r being the circumference of the circle of its base, which actually becomes the length, and the height of the cylinder becomes the width of the rectangle, you are never going to go wrong. Similarly for the cone and for all these net diagrams. So I like to end this session with the value-added components that we are bringing out this year for grade 6, 7, and 8. These are step-by-step solution guides, model assessment papers. So the solution guides have worked solutions for each and every sum in the book with helpful hints. And the model assessment papers are complete 5 papers, 2 mid-year and 3 assessment final year papers, complete with the MCQs and the short questions and the concept-based questions. And I mean, these can be added and multiplied, sort of photocopied and sent to the children. And then, of course, we have the assessment resource pack, which has a marking scheme, the grid, which tells you which SLO was used where, and where were the short questions, which SLO was used in the short questions, which SLO was used in the concept questions, and then the marking schemes, and then how do you give the feedback to the child, the template for that. All of this is made available to you as a value-added component for you to teach mathematics better. So I would like to end my talk now, and from now on, I would like to take your questions. I can see quite a few questions that are coming our way. So let's just now begin with your queries.